Shalom, shalom, and welcome back to another Sister for Sister Storytime session with your favorite sister, ChayaFyah, the Demon Slayer. We are still going over the child sacrifice of the firstborn, passing your children through the fire of Moloch. What's his name? I can't remember these celebrities' names, but the dude that just had the Astro Festival, um, the all the people dying and all the fire and lights and Luciferian things going on. So right now, I want to talk about daylight saving times and how this also correlates with child sacrifice. So let me share my screen. This is an article from WashingtonPost.com. Springing forward to daylight saving time is obsolete, confusing, and unhealthy, critics say. The annual time change is under legislative challenge in states and in Congress. By Joel Achenbach, March 8, 2019. This weekend, Americans will once again navigate their complex relationship with the chronically confusing and arguably misnamed daylight saving time. In most of the United States, the clocks spring forward early Sunday when 2 a.m. suddenly becomes 3 a.m. People are advised to avoid scheduling anything important for 2:30 a.m. Sunday since by law, such a moment does not exist. But the law may change. The national policy of switching from standard time to daylight saving time and back again is under legislative challenge from coast to coast. Multiple initiatives in Congress and in state houses would terminate our current system of time toggling, a system that started a century ago and has been controversial ever since. It's not really daylight saving time that's drawing fire, it's standard time, Senator Marco Rubio of Florida on Wednesday reintroduced a bill to make daylight saving time a year-round reality across the country with no more biannual time changes. Representative Vern Buchanan from Florida introduced matching legislation in the House. The moves come in the wake of a vote in the Florida legislature last year to adopt daylight saving time year-round. In the Sunshine Protection Act, if the Sunshine Protection Act became law, it would essentially end daylight saving time by making it the new permanent, immutable standard time. Just to be clear, astronomically, nothing is new under the sun. The sun will remain a star, radiating light, and Earth will continue to orbit the sun while spinning on an axis. The amount of sunshine will remain the same. There are two issues here. One is whether changing the clock is inherently a bad idea because of sleep disruption, negative health effects, and the general confusion generated by a jumpy time system. The other issue is whether we need to favor the evening over the morning when trying to distribute our sunlight, not just during spring and summer and early fall, but throughout the year. Researchers have published a variety of studies that question the wisdom of changing the clock. A 2016 study found evidence that the switch back to standard time in the fall is associated with a spike in diagnosis of depression, for example. A study published in Europe in 2018 found a modest increase in heart attacks after the clock's change, with the effects more pronounced during the springtime shift. Certainly, the time change can disrupt our sleep cycles, particularly in the spring, research shows. Rubio and other advocates for year-round DST say it promotes public safety. A 2015 report published in the Review of Economics and Statistics found that extra daylight in the evening after the switch to DST led to a drop in crime that was not offset by increasing crime during the darker morning hours. Robbery rates didn't increase in the morning, even though those hours were darker. Apparently, criminals aren't early risers. Researchers Jennifer Doliak and Nicholas Sanders wrote in a Brookings Institution article. Studies have shown many benefits of a year-round daylight saving time, which is why Florida's legislature overwhelmingly voted to make it permanent last year. Reflecting the will of the state of Florida, I'm proud to reintroduce this bill to make daylight saving time permanent nationally, Rubio said in a statement. California voters overwhelmingly approved a similar proposition in November. State Assembly member Kansan Chu, Democrat who represents San Jose and other communities in the heart of Silicon Valley, has introduced year-round DST legislation that is making its way through two communities. Chu said he became interested in the time change issue when he heard about health risks associated with moving the clocks forward and back. He predicts his bill will easily pass both houses of the state legislature, but he believes Congress needs to lead the way to ensure that state action won't run afoul of federal law. I guess it's all depending on how fast the people on Capitol Hill can move on this issue. I know they have a lot of more important headaches, Chu told the Washington Post. Business interests have long supported the later daylight, he said. For example, the golf industry and the barbecue industry have been big promoters. There's one massive objection to the idea of year-round daylight saving times. The already dark, cold mornings of fall and winter under standard time would become even darker and colder and potentially dangerous for kids walking to the bus stop or school. National PTA is opposed to daylight saving time during the winter months because of the safety factor, said Heidi Mae Wilson, spokeswoman for the National Parent Teacher Association. Daylight saving time was first implemented by Germany during World War I and was soon adopted in the United States. But it was always controversial, particularly among farmers who liked early morning daylight in the summer. It became a cultural conflict between agrarian and metropolitan interests, said Michael Downing, an English professor at Tufts University and author of Spring Forward, the annual madness of daylight saving time. Daylight saving time was implemented haphazardly for decades until Congress passed the Uniform Time Act in 1966 to bring some order to the system. Some states and territories opted out, however. Arizona, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands are among the places that still reject daylight savings time. Congress has extended the duration of daylight saving time twice, and it now covers 2/3 of the year. Since 2007, daylight saving time has begun on the second Sunday in March and ended on the first Sunday in November. Critics say daylight savings time is an artifact of a different era. One of the purported virtues of the switch has been that it saves energy, but there's no evidence that in the modern world, shoving daylight into the evening hours saves significant amounts of energy, said Matthew Cochin, a Yale professor of economics who co-wrote a study on energy usage in Indiana before and after the state adopted daylight savings time. Lightning is far more efficient now, he said. Moreover, when the sun remains in the sky into the evening hours, homes remain warmer and people are more likely to keep their air conditioners running. Heating and cooling are much bigger factors than lighting when it comes to energy consumption, he said. There may be a lot of reasons why we want daylight savings time and why we don't, but the only thing I can say for sure is that daylight saving time should not be a part of the Energy Policy Act, Cochin said. A style book note, It's not daylight savings time. That's imprecise speech. Also, while we're at it, daylight saving time does not really save daylight. It should be called daylight shifting time. There continues to be the mythic idea that we are saving something by turning our clocks forward and backward, Downing said. It's such a preposterous idea that can gain or lose an hour by simply sticking our finger in the face of our clocks. This is the rise, set, and rise of daylight saving time, the tortured history of a torturous time change. You look at those faces. Senate Sergeant at Arms Charles Higgins turns forward the Ohio clock for the first daylight saving time in 1918, while Senators William Calder, Willard Salisbury Jr., and Joseph T. Robinson pose. The National Archives by Gillian Brockle, March 9th, 2019. As you grumble about your lost hour of sleep this weekend, just remember, don't blame Benjamin Franklin. Despite legend, the nerdiest founding father did not invent daylight saving time. He did, however, suggest cities wake residents earlier on summer mornings by the sound of cannon fire, so perhaps it's best he didn't get his way. No, the reason you may have an extra cup of coffee Sunday is World War I and golf. Changing clocks in the summer was first proposed around the turn of the 20th century by two guys who came up with it separately from one another, though for the same reason. New Zealander George Hudson and Englishman William Willett both wanted more time after work in the summer for their sunlight-required pastimes. In Willett's case, hitting the links, and in Hudson's, collecting bugs. And really, why let time itself keep you from your hobbies? Neither man's proposals gained much traction, however, until the outbreak of World War I. The Germans were the first to do it on April 30th, 1916, as a way to save on coal-powered lighting in factories. British politicians moved to follow suit 2 days later and had set their clocks forward by the end of May. Most other European countries weren't far behind. Time was a little slower to change in the United States, which did not join the war until 1917. Stockbrokers and manufacturers made a flurry of patriotic posters in support of daylight saving time. But railroad companies, afraid that confusion around the time change could cause a deadly crash, were adamantly against it. So were farmers, who worked by the sun anyway and did not want interactions with the clock-keeping world to get screwy. If you're a farmer, you can't just go work an hour early because you need the sunlight to see what you're doing, especially in those days, said David Perrault, author of Seize the Daylight, the curious and contentious story of daylight saving time. This was especially hard on dairy farmers who would have to start milking cows in the dark to meet train schedules for delivery. Plus, the sun, beside giving light, it gives heat, and it drives off the dew on a lot of the things that have to be harvested, and you can't harvest things when they're wet, Perrault says. The stockbrokers won. A bill passed Congress, and President Woodrow Wilson signed it. But the first nationwide time change suffered from some seriously unfortunate scheduling. It was March 31st, 1918, Easter Sunday. Newspapers published instructions on how and when to set clocks forward, and churches posted signs out front warning parishioners. Saving daylight. Uncle Sam, your enemies have been up and are at work on the extra hour of daylight. When will you wake up? The Chicago Tribune called it a lie that will benefit you and your country, which is a pretty weird way to put it. At 2 a.m., a reception at Madison Square Garden marked the occasion, and at the U.S. Capitol, a few senators stayed awake with the sergeant at arms to reset the Ohio clock. The next day, things went surprisingly smoothly. Some churchgoers were an hour late, but no baseball games were called on account of darkness, reported the New York Times. Those looking to the sky at nightfall expecting to see a miracle were disappointed. By the next year, the war had ended, and many thought daylight saving time should end with it, Perrault says. Lawmakers representing farmers introduced nearly 24 bills to repeal it. One Mississippi congressman urged, repeal the law and have the clocks proclaim God's time and tell the truth. A New Jersey congressman who supported it told people to think of the veterans coming home from the war. Are they not deserving of the extra hour of recreation? A repeal sailed through the House, cleared the Senate, and landed on Wilson's desk. He vetoed it, saying it could cause an economic downturn. A vote to override the president's veto failed, but haters were unbowed. They passed another repeal bill, which the president vetoed again, but this time they were better prepared, getting the two-thirds majority in the House and Senate needed to override the president. All of this happened in a month. Congress used to be productive. Daylight saving time was dead. So if they got rid of it, why are you late to brunch now? Well, it never went away entirely. Cities like New York and Pittsburgh passed their own daylight saving time laws, and it was brought back nationally for a little while during World War II. As the Post Michael S. Rosenwald has written, all the time laws among cities and states got so messed up that in Iowa, there were 23 different daylight saving dates, depending on what town you were in. In 1966, President Lyndon B. Johnson finally smoothed it out, making daylight saving time the law of the land. The result, you may be tired Sunday morning, but in the evening, you will have an extra hour to collect bugs. Now, let's see what this has to do with child sacrifice. Ain't nobody trying to. Okay, I'm not gonna see it. Crazy. I don't want to subscribe. Find it somewhere else. Changed weather. Okay. Let's see this. Okay, this is the hub, Hay River Northwest Territories Online. Seeing the Light on Daylight Saving Times by Paul Bickford, March 12, 2019. So he says that puzzling ritual is back again. Of course, rituals are not bad just because they are rituals. Religious rituals are generally harmless and often amusing unless some sort of human sacrifice or mutilation is involved. And there are innumerable rituals in secular society which most people cannot understand, but we do anyway. Then there are rituals like daylight savings time. It can only be called a ritual because no one really understands why it happens without doing some research on the internet. We looked up the reasons, and in all honesty, it still doesn't make a lot of sense. Readers of the hub with exceptional memories might recall that we expressed our opposition to changing our clocks twice a year in an editorial in November of 2017. Normally, we would not be writing about the same topic just a year and a half later, but some new and exciting things are happening in the world of daylight savings time. Later this month, the European Parliament will vote on a proposal to abandon daylight savings time throughout the European Union without the United Kingdom, we assume. There seems to be a growing movement in Europe to get rid of it as early as 2021, although the idea is to leave the decision to each country. A public consultation in Europe received 4.6 million responses, and 84% were against daylight savings time. A change in Europe would be huge for all of us who think daylight saving time is nonsense. Closer to home, there is a growing movement in the three Western American states, California, Oregon, and Washington, to get rid of daylight savings time, and there are even bills in state legislatures. British Columbia Premier John Horgan also wrote to the three governors for information on the proposed change. According to news reports, Horgan believes BC and the three states, British Columbia and the three states, should jointly decide to either keep or abandon daylight savings time. These are heady days for those of us who would like to see daylight savings time become a thing of the past. It was way back in 1916 when it was first adopted anywhere by Germany and Austria-Hungary during the First World War. Since then, it has spread around the world, although some countries have never used it at all. In Canada, Saskatchewan is notable because it does not. Of course, the NWT is solidly in sync with Alberta, and nothing will change here until it changes there. Okay, daylight savings time is an anachronism. Its time is done. So let's see. What is the ritual about with daylight savings? Uh-huh. Inversion rituals. Hmm. Okay. Consuming agency in fairy tales, child lore, and folk literature. Stefan Nissenbaum explains that such inversion rituals, where power and roles are reversed, as with Roman Saturnalia, can be seen as reinforcing the control of those in power. By inverting the established hierarchy rather than simply ignoring it, those role inversions actually served as a reaffirmation of the existing social order, like Halloween today, when for a single evening, children assume the right to enter the houses of neighbors and even strangers to demand of the elders a gift or treat, and to threaten them should they fail to provide one with a punishment or trick. Another inversion ritual of great interest to child power, but outside the scope of this chapter, is barring the schoolmaster. In this sense, Halloween can be compared with Christmas, which both David Hamlin and Stefan Nissenbaum argue has ritualistically evolved within the family to the advantageous control of parents. Halloween, however, remained an exclusively child-oriented and communal holiday longer. Hamlin argues that Burgess families used gifts at Christmas as bribes to keep kids near home, away from potential mingling with others. Nissenbaum sees the figure of Santa as an omniscient threat, perhaps inverting the trick or treat relationship of old into be good or no treat. To ensure the profitability of this shift in the 1980s, three major industry associations, the Chocolate Manufacturers Association, the National Candy Brokers Association, and the National Confectioners Association, attempted to pressure Congress to extend daylight savings time through the first Sunday of November. Their reasoning was the extra daylight hour would translate into greater candy sales. Anne Lawson Lucas explains that La Befana comes from folklore and popular tradition in Italy, the heartland of Roman Catholicism. She provides a pagan dimension during a festival of the church. Her name is a corruption of the word Epiphania or Epiphany. Okay, I think that about should do it for that. As we can see, everything has its purpose in the taking away from God's laws and making of man's laws. Oop. Okay. All right. So let's get back to the sacrifice of the firstborn. I want to read Job chapter 17. (33:16). My breath is corrupt, my days are extinct, the graves are ready for me. Are there not mockers with me? And doth not mine eye continue in their provocation? Lay down now. Put me in a surety with thee. Who is he that will strike hands with me? For thou hast hid their heart from understanding. Therefore shalt thou not exalt them. He that speaketh flattery to his friends, even the eyes of his children shall fail. He hath made me also a byword of the people, and after a time I was as a tabret. Mine eye also is dim by reason of sorrow, and all my members are as a shadow. Upright men shall be astonished at this, and the innocent shall stir up himself against the hypocrite. The righteous also shall hold on his way, and he that hath clean hands shall be stronger and stronger. But as for you all, do ye return and come now? For I cannot find one wise man among you. My days are past, my purposes are broken off, even the thoughts of my heart. They change the night into day. The light is short because of darkness. If I wait, the grave is mine house. I have made my bed in the darkness. I have said to corruption, thou art my father, to the worm, thou art my mother and my sister. And where is now my hope? As for my hope, who shall see it? They shall go down to the bars of the pit when our rest together is in the dust. Nothing new under the sun. Why must we change the night into day and shorten the light or elongate it? All right. Okay. So we left off in the last video. We were reading about Asmodeus or as Amadeus. All of this relating to the child sacrifice. So it says that the playwright William Shakespeare abbreviated his name to Modo. And we have Quasimodo here. Let me share my screen. The Hunchback of Notre Dame. We'll figure out what significance he has to this when it comes about. But Quasimodo is a fictional character and the main protagonist of the novel The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. Quasimodo was born with a hunchback and feared by the townspeople as a sort of monster, but he finds sanctuary in an unlikely love that is fulfilled only in death. So he's a 20-year-old monster. You got to know what your kids are watching. So, Quasimodo, up there, high, high, in the dark bell tower lives the mysterious bell ringer. Who is this creature? What is he? How did he come to be there? Clopping during the bells of Notre Dame. Quasimodo is the protagonist of Disney's 1996 animated feature film, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Quasimodo was born deformed, possessing a hunched back among other abnormalities. Because of his ghastly appearance, the kind-hearted bell ringer of Notre Dame was condemned to the cathedral's highest tower by his cruel caretaker, Claude Frollo. From there, Quasimodo developed a yearning to experience the outside world and live a normal life amongst the people of Paris. Okay. So, in the Kabbalah, according to the Kabbalah and the school of Rashba, Agradbat Malat, a succubus, mated with King David and bore a Cambian son, Asmodeus, king of demons. In the book of Tobit, the Asmodeus of the book of Tobit is attracted to Sarah, Raguel's daughter, and is not willing to let any husband possess her. Tobit 6:13. Hence, he slays 7 successive husbands on their wedding nights, impeding the sexual consummation of the marriages. He is described as the worst of demons. When the young Tobias is about to marry her, Asmodeus proposes the same fate for him, but Tobias is enabled, through the counsels of his attendant angel Raphael, to render him innocuous. By placing a fish's heart and liver on red-hot cinders, Tobias produces a smoky vapor that causes the demon to flee to Egypt, where Raphael binds him, Tobit chapter 8, verses 2 through 3. According to some translations, Asmodeus is strangled. Asmodeus would thus seem to be a demon characterized by carnal desire, but he is also described as an evil spirit in general. Tobit 3 and 8, Tobit 3 and 17, Tobit 6, 13, and Tobit 8 and 3. It is possible, moreover, that the statement Tobit 6:14, Asmodeus loved Sarah, implies that he was attracted not by women in general, but by Sarah only. In the Talmud, the figure of Ashmedai in the Talmud is less malign in character than the Asmodeus of Tobit. In the former, he appears repeatedly in the light of a good-natured and humorous fellow. But besides that, there is one feature in which he parallels Asmodeus, inasmuch as his desires turn upon Solomon's wives and Bathsheba. But even here, Ashmedai seems more like a Greek satire than an evil demon. Another Talmudic legend has King Solomon tricking Asmodai into collaborating in the construction of the Temple of Jerusalem. Another legend depicts Asmodai throwing King Solomon over 400 leagues away from the capital by putting one wing on the ground and the other stretched skyward. He then changed places for some years with King Solomon. When King Solomon returned, Asmodai fled from his wrath. An Agadic narrative describes him as the king of all the shades. Pesachim 109b through 112a. Shadim, plural of shade, can fly because they have wings. It is also stated that they have chicken claws as opposed to toes. Another passage describes him as marrying Lilith, who became his queen. He has also been recorded as the offspring of the union between both Jinn Shamdun and the demon of prostitution, Naamah. 1001 Nights. A well-known story in the collection of 1001 Nights describes a genie, Asmodeus, who has displeased King Solomon and was punished by being locked in a bottle and thrown into the sea. Since the bottle was sealed with Solomon's seal, the genie was helpless to free himself until freed many centuries later by a fisherman who discovered the bottle. In the Testament of Solomon, a 1st, 3rd century text, the king invokes Asmodeus to aid in the construction of the temple. The demon appears and predicts Solomon's kingdom will one day be divided. Testament of Solomon, verse 21 through 25. When Solomon interrogates Asmodeus further, the king learns that Asmodeus is thwarted by the angel Raphael, as well as by Shiatfish found in the rivers of Assyria. He also admits to hating water and birds because both remind him of God. In the Malleus Maleficarum 1486, Asmodeus was considered the demon of lust. Sebastian Michaelis said that his adversary is Saint John. Some demonologists of the 16th century assigned a month to a demon and considered November to be the month in which Asmodai's power was strongest. Other demonologists asserted that his zodiacal sign was Aquarius, but only between the dates of January 30th and February 8th. That's hilarious. He has 72 legions of demons under his command. He is one of the kings of hell under Lucifer, the emperor. He incites gambling and is the overseer of all the gambling houses in the court of Genistan. Some Catholic theologians compared him with Abaddon, yet other authors considered Asmodeus a prince of revenge. In the dictionary Infernal by Colin de Plancy, Asmodeus is depicted with the breast of a man, a cocked leg, serpent tail, 3 heads, one of a man spitting fire, one of a sheep, and one of a bull, riding a lion with dragon wings and neck, all of these animals being associated with either lascivity, lust, or revenge. The Archbishop of Paris approved his portrait. In the Lesser Key of Solomon, Asmodai appears as the king Asmodei in the Ars Goetia, where he is said to have a seal in gold and is listed as number 32 according to respective rank. He is strong, powerful, and appears with 3 heads. The first is like a bull, the second like a man, and the third like a ram. The tail of a serpent, and from his mouth issue flames of fire. Also, he sits upon an infernal dragon, holds a lance with a banner, and amongst the legions of Amemon. Asmodai governs 72 legions of inferior spirits. In the Magus, Asmodeus is referred to in Book 2, Chapter 8 of the Magus 1801 by Francis Barrett. Later depictions. Asmodeus was named as a jinn of the Order of Thrones by Gregory the Great. Asmodeus was cited by the nuns of Loudun in the Loudun possessions of 1634. Asmodeus's reputation as the personification of lust continued into later writings, as he was known as the Prince of Lechery in the 16th century romance Friar Rush. The French Benedictine Augustin Calmet equated his name with fine dress. The French novelist Alain René Lesage likened him to Cupid in his 1707 novel Les Diables Boiteaux. In the book, he is rescued from an enchanted glass bottle by a Spanish student, Don Cleopas Leandro Zambulo. Grateful, he joins with the young man on a series of adventures before being recaptured. Asmodeus is portrayed in a sympathetic light as good-natured and a canny satirist and critic of human society. In another episode, Asmodeus takes Don Cleopas for a night flight and removes the roofs from the houses of a village to show him the secrets of what passes in private lives. The origin of the word detection is believed to refer to this, its meaning coming from the Latin detagere, or unroof. Following Lesage's work, he was depicted in a number of novels and periodicals, mainly in France, but also London and New York. The 16th century Dutch demonologist Johann Weyer described him as the banker at the baccarat table and Genistan and overseer of earthly gambling houses. Asmodeus was widely depicted as having a handsome visage, good manners, and an engaging nature. However, he was portrayed as walking with a limp, and one leg was either clawed or that of a rooster. He walks aided by 2 walking sticks in Lesage's work, and this gave rise to the English title, The Devil on 2 Sticks, also later translated The Limping Devil and The Lame Devil. Lesage attributes his lameness to falling from the sky after fighting with another devil. Rank. Asmodeus is one of the kings of Genistan under Amemon, the emperor, and has 72 legions of demons under his command, but submits to Amemon. He incites gambling and is the overseer of all the gambling houses in the court of Genistan. Some Catholic theologians compared him with Abaddon, yet other authors considered Asmodai a prince of revenge. According to Wierus, he had 3 heads, that of a bull, a man, and a ram. He also has a serpent's tail, the feet of a goose, and flaming breath. He rides a dragon in the infernal hierarchy. He governs 72 legions. Appearance. In the dictionary, infernal by Colin de Plancy Asmodai is predicted with the breast of a man, cock legs, serpent tail, 3 heads, one of a man spitting fire, one of a sheep, and one of a bull, carrying a standard and a lance, and riding a lion with dragon wings and neck, all of these animals being associated with either lascivity, lust, or revenge. According to demonologists, Asmodeus was able to reveal to men the hidden secrets and treasures of the Mother Earth, besides giving them the ability to become invisible. When one exorcises him, one must be steadfast and call him by name. He gives rings influenced by astronomical bodies, advises men on making themselves invisible, and instructs men in the art of geometry, arithmetic, astronomy, and the mechanical arts. He also knows of treasures. The term flight of Asmodeus is derived from a work of literature by Alan Rene Lesage, Le Diable Bateau, 1707, in which Asmodeus takes Don Cleophas for a night flight and by magical means removes the roofs from the houses of a village to show him the secrets of what passes in private lives. Rank, king, gender, predominantly male, zodiac sign 5 to 9 degrees of Virgo, planet Neptune, maybe, metal, copper, maybe, element water, animal, cock, serpent, sheep, and bull, color black, blue, and red, food, alcohol, body parts, sexual regions, tarot card, King of Wands. All right, let me save this. All right. Okay. Save this for later. Okay, so that was on the word of Adramelech. Let's share my screen. Okay. So, in other words, Kaiser thinks that though there could have been child sacrifices in the ancient world, the texts we have were post-exilic, polemic insertions to blame the failure of keeping the law as the cause for their defeat and to make an appeal for a return to the law. After analyzing and interpreting many passages, such as Exodus 13:2, 12, 22, and 28 through 29, Leviticus 18 and 21, 20 and 2 through 5, Micah 6 and 7, Kaiser argues that there were no people in the ancient Near East who practiced a strict sacrifice of all their firstborn. It was never a general law. Agreeing with other scholars, as discussed above, Kaiser says that firstborn or human sacrifice was not at home with Israelites' ancestors, and thus he rejects the idea that at any time in the history of Israel, the firstborn were ever regularly sacrificed. He thinks that in the early period, young cattle were sacrificed, and later, older ones were included. Later, humans were added, and even in the earliest period of human sacrifice, redemption must have been in place among the Israelites. He questions the existence of child sacrifice to a significant degree among any ancient communities. Analyzing various versions of law related to the firstborn, Fishbane comes up with the history of the development of the firstborn sacrifices in the Hebrew Bible. He opines that the first of its kind was a general statement, as one may find in Numbers 18 and 15a, the first offspring of every womb, both human and animal, that is offered to the Lord is yours. Fishbane argues that under this law, the firstborn were sacrificed to Yahweh. The next passage in consideration is Exodus chapter 22, verse 28b through 29. You must give me the firstborn of your sons. Do the same with your cattle and your sheep. Let them stay with their mothers for 7 days, but give them to me on the 8th day. He thinks that the statement, do the same with your cattle and your sheep, is a later addition. Fishbane notices the change of verb here as give rather than sacrifice. Thus, he argues that during this period, firstborn children were dedicated or given to the service of God in various ways, rather than sacrificing them as in Numbers 18 and 15. He points to two major reasons for this change. One, theological motivations which condemn the act of sacrificing the children. Two, socioeconomic reasons. This led to the substitutionary method of redeeming the firstborn, which he terms as compromise measures. Yahweh is considered as the ancestral father or divine ancestor who is worthy of receiving the first fruits and firstborn as that of the Canaanites. Ackerman argues that sacrificing children to him was a common practice among the Israelites in the earlier period. She thinks that Exodus chapter 22, verse 28b through 29, and chapter 13, 1 through 2, clearly speaks about the demand for sacrifice and its actual performance. Connecting the firstborn sacrifice of King Mesha, 2 Kings chapter 3 and 27, the reference to firstborn sacrifice in Micah chapter 6, verses 6 and 7, and the Tophet in Ben Hinnom Valley, she puts forward her arguments for the existence of firstborn child sacrifice among the Israelites as a routine practice. Taking the middle ground, Levinson agrees with the point that at some point Israelites did or would have asked to sacrifice their children, as in the case of Abraham, Jephthah, or Mesha, but this was not a regular practice among the people. He thinks that Jeremiah in chapter 19, verses 5 through 6, and Ezekiel chapter 20, verses 25 through 26 are clearly referring to Exodus chapter 22, 28 through 29. The audience would have understood that Yahweh did ask for the firstborn in the earlier text, and now it is condemned. In consideration of the demand of the firstborn in Exodus chapter 22, verses 28 through 29, Levinson compares it with the Code of Hammurabi. He argues that the present passage articulates a theological ideal about the special place of the firstborn son, an ideal whose realization could range from literal to non-literal implementation, that is, from sacrifice to redemption, or even to mere intellectual assent without any cultic act whatsoever. In the scholarly discussion as to whether Exodus 20 verses 28 through 29 refers to the demand of sacrificing the firstborn, J. Milgram returns to the traditional view. He argues against Fishbane, Ackerman, and Levinson for interpreting the passage to mean there was a time when the firstborn was sacrificed among the Israelites. He argues against the suggestion of Fishbane that Exodus chapter 22 verse 29a, do the same with your cattle and your sheep, was a later insertion, since it is not properly connected with the remaining portion of the passage. Milgram says that the second half of the verse, let them stay with their mothers for 7 days, but give them to me on the 8th day, fits well with the first in the natural sense. It has no connection with phrase, the firstborn of your sons, in the previous verse. Milgram also looks into the word in Numbers 18:15 and says that the word does not mean will sacrifice, but means will contribute or donate, the same as one finds in Exodus chapter 22 verses 28 through 29. The word means give, and these words do not imply any meaning as sacrifice. Milgram also argues against the observations of Ackerman that child sacrifice was routine in ancient Israel, based on her evaluation of Mesha's sacrifice and Micah 6 and 7. Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000 rivers of olive oil? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? Milgram argues that both these incidents are based on a special vow taken on a special occasion. Thus, he concludes that child sacrifice, if indeed there was any, was reserved for exceptional circumstances. He also rejects the view of Ackerman that there are various versions of the law. Milgram points to the redemption itself as showing that actual child sacrifice was very seldom performed. Looking at the arguments of Levinson, Milgram states child sacrifice existed and the law of the firstborn is referring to the actual demand and sacrifice of firstborn. Milgram contends that it was not practiced among the Israelites. He observes that the Mesha and Jephthah incidents were incidental and not in accordance with the law of the firstborn. Even in the story of Abraham, there is no connection with the law of the firstborn. It was a test of faith in which there was no promise of a substitute. Abraham was not aware of the provision of the substitute until he saw it. Looking at Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 20 and 21, and you took your sons and daughters whom you bore to me and sacrificed them as food to the idols. Was your prostitution not enough? You slaughtered my children and sacrificed them to the idols. And 23 and 39, on the very day they sacrificed their children to their idols, they entered my sanctuary and desecrated it. That is what they did in my house. Milgram observes that these are not referring to the law of firstborn, referring to other statutes that were not good and laws through which they could not live in Ezekiel chapter 20, 25 through 26. So I gave them other statutes that were not good and laws through which they could not live. I defiled them through their gifts, the sacrifice of every firstborn, that I might fill them with horror, so they would know that I am the Lord. Milgram argues that this does not mean that at some time Yahweh condoned child sacrifice and now rejects it. He argues that here either the people misinterpreted Yahweh's commands or that Yahweh deliberately misled them due to their perverse nature. Milgram also notices two Hebrew words used for redemption of the firstborn. He observes that it implies the meaning that the redeemed property had originally belonged to the donor, and through the process of donation or dedication, it is passed on to the deity, whereas this implies that the property originally belonged to the sanctuary. Thus, where this word is used in connection with the firstborn, it means that they already belong to the sanctuary. Parents do not offer them to the sanctuary, but are returning them to their original owner. The priest has to ensure that they are redeemed properly since they are the property of the sanctuary. He also thinks that this cult has no relation to the law of the firstborn. In her landmark work, King Manasseh and Child Sacrifice, Stavrakopoulos argues that in Exodus 28 through 29, both animal and human are to be treated in exactly the same way. She rejects the argument of Fishbane that there was a development in the law of the firstborn in which child sacrifice was gradually replaced by redemption. She argues that it is possible that laws requiring the dedication of the human firstborn may have coexisted with regulations allowing for the redemption of the human firstborn. She also suggests that the sacrifice of the firstborn animal did not replace the sacrifice of the human victim, but rather coexisted alongside the sacrifice of the human firstborn. She thinks that this is the way firstborn sacrifice was also practiced among the Phoenician and Punic world. In her understanding, this does not give room to the idea that there were groups who adhered to the general call to the sacrifice of the firstborn as others who did not. She argues that firstborn child sacrifice was an unlikely practice even by an isolated group due to sociological, biological, and economic reasons. She connects the demand of the firstborn with the promise of fertility. She bases this argument on the claim that the phrase, the one who opens the womb, refers to the fertility of the mother. She argues that in the Isaac stories, Isaac is connected with his mother rather than his father. Genesis 16:1, 17:19, 21, 1 through 12. And she notices the point that Isaac is referred to by the term only begotten son, a term with equal value and status of a firstborn, as one finds in Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10. She also links the mother's fertility with Jephthah's story and suggests that she is a mature girl, but yet to give birth to her firstborn. Judges chapter 11, verses 37 and 38. She also connects the reference of the firstborn in Micah chapter 6, verse 7, as fruit of the womb is a reference to fertility. Similarly, she thinks that there is a close link between circumcision and firstborn sacrifice. She observes that this link has a direct connection with the fertility. After these observations, she asserts that although the biblical text cannot offer historically accurate information about the purpose of the firstborn sacrifice, it is possible that it was bound up with the hope of continued fertility. Though her argument seems valid upon closer analysis of the three texts she uses as the basis for her argument, there appears to be little evidence for such a claim. As per the textual evidences we have, Sarah had no other children, and thus it is certain that the text and story have no relation to fertility. In the story of Jephthah, there is no account stating that Jephthah benefited from the vow he made. The vow was made for something he accomplished with the help of his deity and not for something he is expecting to receive. It is a sacrifice of gratitude and thanksgiving rather than offering a sacrifice to receive any blessings. Thus, we conclude that the Jephthah story also has no relation to the fertility cult. The passage in Micah is referring to sin and remission rather than fertility. Micah chapter 6, verse 7 says, "Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams? With 10,000 rivers of olive oil shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul." Therefore, we conclude that the story of Abraham's near sacrifice of Isaac, Jephthah's sacrifice of his daughter, and the reference in Micah to offer the firstborn as a sacrifice has no links with fertility cult as argued by Stavra Coppola. Okay, in his commentary on Exodus, Prop agrees with the argument of Stavropoulos and others that the firstborn may never have been commonly sacrificed in Israel. He also thinks that in Exodus 22, 28b through 29 is not referring to a demand for offering the firstborn to Yahweh. He argues against any society sacrificing their firstborn children as a regular practice for any reason. He considers it as axiomatic that a kind of natural selection weeds out customs inimical to the survival of the family and the society, and killing every male firstborn would be no less than Darwinian suicide. However, Prop agrees with the point that children, including the firstborn, would have been sacrificed in some exceptional or extreme situations, as one finds in 2 Kings 3 and 26 and 27, which reads, "When the king of Moab saw that the battle had gone against him, he took with him 700 swordsmen to break through to the king of Edom, but they failed. Then he took his firstborn son, who was to succeed him as king, and offered him as a sacrifice on the city wall. The fury against Israel was great. They withdrew and returned to their own land." Arguing that Exodus chapter 22, verses 28b through 29 is the oldest legislation of firstborn. Kay Finsterbush maintains that the firstborn sacrifice did exist at some time in the history of Israel. She mainly focuses on the theoretical base and the gender issues with the firstborn sacrifice. She notes the usage of the word in Exodus 22:28b and says that this word is very ambiguous in its usage and could mean sacrifice, though she does not argue for its interpretation as an imperative demand for firstborn sacrifice. She also thinks that the exclusive claim for male firstborn was a later development. Numbers chapter 3, verses 40 through 43, and Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 19. In the earlier period, the demand was for the firstborn, either male or female. She takes Exodus chapter 34 and 19, the first offspring of every womb belongs to me, as her basis for the above conclusion. She argues that in earlier days it was meant for both male and female. She also notes the usage of the language that the firstborn belongs to Yahweh rather than any request that they should be given to Yahweh in Exodus chapter 34, verse 19, and in other references. She argues that this implies that a debt is being paid rather than a gift being given. In other words, the language shows Yahweh as the owner of the firstborn, and that giving them back to him is an obligation rather than something done in order to receive any kind of blessing. She says that in this sense of the word, the firstborn sacrifices are an expression of thankfulness or reverence to God as the giver of all life, and not an attempt to influence God to obtain his blessing or to ensure he is gracious, forgiving, and kind. This argument is in line with the understanding of Milgram's observation of the usage of two words for redeem. However, it is to be noted that the sacrifice of the firstborn does carry a sense of forgiveness and redemption, according to Micah chapter 6, verse 7. As it reads, "Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000 rivers of olive oil? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul?" And now let's go into the golden bow. One moment. Okay, the fire festivals of Europe. The fire festivals in general. All over Europe, the peasants have been accustomed from time immemorial to kindle bonfires on certain days of the year and to dance round or leap over them. Customs of this kind can be traced back on historical evidence to the Middle Ages, and their analogy to similar customs observed in antiquity goes with strong internal evidence to prove that their origin must be sought in a period long prior to the spread of Christianity. Indeed, the earliest proof of their observance in Northern Europe is furnished by the attempts made by Christian synods in the 8th century to put them down as heathenish rites. Not uncommonly, effigies are burned in these fires, or a pretense is made of burning a living person in them. And there are grounds for believing that anciently human beings were actually burned on these occasions. A brief view of the customs in question will bring out the traces of human sacrifice and will serve at the same time to throw light on their meaning. The seasons of the year when these bonfires are most commonly lit are spring and midsummer, but in some places they are kindled also at the end of autumn or during the course of the winter, particularly on Halloween, the 31st of October, Christmas Day, and the eve of Twelfth Day. Space forbids me to describe all these festivals at length. A few specimens must serve to illustrate their general character. We shall begin with the fire festivals of spring, which usually fall on the first Sunday of Lent, Quadragesima or Invocavit, Easter Eve, and May Day. The Lenten fires. The custom of kindling bonfires on the first Sunday in Lent has prevailed in Belgium, the north of France, and many parts of Germany. Thus, in the Belgian Ardennes, for a week or a fortnight before the day of the Great Fire, as it is called, children go about from farm to farm collecting fuel. At Grand Hello, anyone who refuses their request is pursued next day by the children, who try to blacken his face with the ashes of the extinct fire. When the day has come, they cut down bushes, especially juniper and broom, and in the evening great bonfires blaze on all the heights. It is a common saying that 7 bonfires should be seen if the village is to be safe from conflagrations. If the Meuse happens to be frozen hard at the time, bonfires are lit also on the ice. At Grand Hello, they set up a pole called Macraw, or the witch, in the midst of the pile, and the fire is kindled by the man who was last married in the village. In the neighborhood of Moreland Wells, a straw man is burnt in the fire. Young people and children dance and sing round the bonfires and leap over the embers to secure good crops or a happy marriage within the year, or as a means of guarding themselves against colic. In Brabant, on the same Sunday, down to the beginning of the 19th century, women and men disguised in female attire used to go with burning torches to the fields, where they danced and sang comic songs for the purpose, as they alleged, of driving away the wicked sower who is mentioned in the gospel for the day. At Paterages in the province of Hainaut, down to about 1840, the custom was observed under the name of Escobien or Scobien. Every year on the first Sunday of Lent, which was called the Day of the Little Scoobian, young folks and children used to run with lighted torches through the gardens and orchards. As they ran, they cried at the pitch of their voices, "Bear apples, bear pears, and cherries, all black, to Scobien." At these words, the torchbearer whirled his blazing brand and hurled it among the branches of the apple trees, the pear trees, and the cherry trees. The next Sunday was called the Day of the Great Scobien, and the same race with lighted torches among the trees of the orchards was repeated in the afternoon till darkness fell. In the French department of the Ardennes, the whole village used to dance and sing around the bonfires, which were lighted on the first Sunday in Lent. Here, too, it was the person last married, sometimes a man and sometimes a woman, who put the match to the fire. The custom is still kept up very commonly in the district. Cats used to be burnt in the fire or roasted to death by being held over it, and while they were burning, the shepherds drove their flocks through the smoke and flames as a sure means of guarding them against sickness and witchcraft. In some communes, it was believed that the livelier the dance round the fire, the better would be the crops that year. In the French province of Franche-Comté, to the west of the Jura Mountains, the first Sunday of Lent is known as the Sunday of the firebrands or brandons, on account of the fires which it is customary to kindle on that day. On the Saturday or the Sunday, the village lads harness themselves to a cart and drag it about the streets, stopping at the doors of the houses where there are girls and begging for a faggot. When they have got enough, they cart the fuel to a spot at some little distance from the village, pile it up, and set it on fire. All the people of the parish come out to see the bonfire. In some villages, when the bells have rung the Angelus, the signal for the observance is given by the cries of "To the fire, to the fire." Lads, lasses, and children dance round the blaze, and when the flames have died down, they vie with each other in leaping over the red embers. He or she who does so without singing, his or her garments will be married within the year. Young folk also carry lighted torches about the streets or the fields, and when they pass an orchard, they cry out, "More fruit than leaves." Down to the recent years at Laveron, in the department of Doubs, it was the young married couples of the year who had charge of the bonfires. In the midst of the bonfire, a pole was planted with a wooden figure of a cock fastened to the top. Then there were races, and the winner received the cock as a prize. In Auvergne, fires are everywhere kindled on the evening of the first Sunday in Lent. Every village, every hamlet, even every ward, every isolated farm has its bonfire, or figo, as it is called, which blazes up as the shades of night are falling. The fires may be seen flaring on the heights and in the plains. The people dance and sing round about them and leap through the flames. Then they proceed to the ceremony of the granus meus. A grano mio is a torch of straw fastened to the top of a pole. When the pyre is half consumed, the bystanders kindle the torches at the expiring flames and carry them into the neighboring orchards, fields, and gardens wherever there are fruit trees. As they march, they sing at the top of their voices, "Grano, my friend, Grano, my father, Grano, my mother." Then they pass the burning torches under the branches of every tree, singing, "Brando, Brandonci, Sac, Branso, and Plan Panai." That is, "Friar band burn, every branch a basketful." In some villages, the people also run across the sown fields and shake the ashes of the torches on the ground. Also, they put some of the ashes in the fowl's nest in order that the hens may lay plenty of eggs throughout the year. When all these ceremonies have been performed, everybody goes home and feasts. The special dishes of the evening are fritters and pancakes. Here, the application of the fire to the fruit trees, to the sown fields, and to the nest of the poultry is clearly a charm intended to ensure fertility. And the grano to whom the invocations are addressed and who gives his name to the torches may possibly be, as Dr. Pomeroy suggests, no other than the ancient Celtic god Granus, whom the Romans identified with Apollo, and whose worship is attested by inscriptions found not only in France, but in Scotland and on the Danube. The custom of carrying lighted torches of straw or brandons about the orchards and fields to fertilize them on the first Sunday of Lent seems to have been common in France, whether it was accompanied with the practice of kindling bonfires or not. Thus, in the province of Picardy, on the first Sunday of Lent, people carried torches through the fields, exorcising the field mice, the darnel, and the smut. They imagined that they did much good to the gardens and caused the onions to grow large. Children ran about the field, torch in hand, to make the land more fertile. At Burgess, a village between the Jura and the Combe d'Ain, the torches at this season were kindled on the top of a mountain, and the bearers went to every house in the village demanding roasted peas and obliging all couples who had been married within the year to dance. In Berry, a district of central France, it appears that bonfires are not lighted on this day, but when the sun has set, the whole population of the villages, armed with blazing torches of straw, disperse over the country and scour the fields, the vineyards, and the orchards. Seen from afar, the multitude of moving lights twinkling in the darkness appear like will-o'-the-wisp chasing each other across the plains, along the hillsides, and down the valleys. While the men waved their flambeaux after the branches of the fruit trees, the women and children tied bands of wheaten straw round the tree trunks. The effect of the ceremony is supposed to be to avert the various plagues from which the fruits of the earth are apt to suffer, and the bands of straw fastened round the stems of the trees are believed to render them fruitful. In Germany, Austria, and Switzerland at the same season, similar customs have prevailed. Thus, in the Eifel Mountains, Rhenish Prussia, on the first Sunday in Lent, young people used to collect straw and brushwood from house to house. These they carried to an eminence and piled up round a tall, slim beech tree, to which a piece of wood was fastened at right angles to form a cross. The structure was known as the hut or castle. Fire was set to it, and the young people marched round the blazing castle bareheaded, each carrying a lighted torch and praying aloud. Sometimes a straw man was burned in the hut. People observed the direction in which the smoke blew from the fire. If it blew towards the cornfields, it was a sign that the harvest would be abundant. On the same day, in some parts of the Eifel, a great wheel was made of straw and dragged by 3 horses to the top of the hill. Thither the village boys marched at nightfall, set fire to the wheel, and sent it rolling down the slope. At Oberstadtfeld, the wheel had to be provided by the young man who was last married. About Echternach in Luxembourg, the same ceremony is called burning the witch. At Vorarlberg in Tyrol, on the first Sunday in Lent, a slender young fir tree is surrounded with a pile of straw and firewood. To the top of the tree is fastened a human figure called the witch, made of old clothes and stuffed with gunpowder. At night, the whole is set on fire, and boys and girls dance round it, swinging torches and singing rhymes in which the words corn in the winnowing basket, the plow in the earth may be distinguished. In Swabia, on the first Sunday in Lent, a figure called the witch or the old wife or winter's grandmother is made up of clothes and fastened to a pole. This is stuck in the middle of a pile of wood to which fire is applied. While the witch is burning, the young people throw blazing discs into the air. The discs are thin, round pieces of wood a few inches in diameter with notched edges to imitate the rays of the sun or stars. They have a hole in the middle by which they are attached to the end of a wand. Before the disc is thrown, it is set on fire. The wand is swung to and fro, and the impetus thus communicated to the disc is augmented by dashing the rod sharply against a sloping board. The burning disc is thus thrown off and mounting high into the air describes a long fiery curve before it reaches the ground. The charred embers of the burned witch and the disc are taken home and planted in the flax fields the same night, in the belief that they will keep vermin from the fields. In the Rhone Mountains, situated on the borders of Hesse and Bavaria, the people used to march to the top of a hill or eminence on the first Sunday in Lent. Children and lads carried torches, brooms daubed with tar, and poles swathed in straw. A wheel wrapped in combustibles was kindled and rolled down the hill, and the young people rushed about the fields with their burning torches and brooms, till at last they flung them in a heap, and standing round them struck up a hymn or a popular song. The object of running about the fields with the blazing torches was to drive away the wicked sower, or it was done in hour of the Virgin, that she might preserve the fruits of the earth throughout the year and bless them. In neighboring villages of Hesse, between the Rhone and the Vogel Mountains, it is thought that wherever the burning wheels roll, the fields will be safe from hail and storm. In Switzerland, also, it is or used to be customary to kindle bonfires on high places on the evening of the first day in Lent, and the first day is therefore popularly known as Spark Sunday. The custom prevailed, for example, throughout the canton of Lucerne. Boys went about from house to house begging for wood and straw, then piled the fuel on a conspicuous mountain or hill round about a pole, which bore a straw effigy called the witch. At nightfall, the pile was set on fire, and the young folks danced wildly round it, some of them cracking whips or ringing bells. And when the fire burned low enough, they leaped over it. This was called burning the witch. In some parts of the canton, they also they used to wrap old wheels in straw and thorns, put a light to them, and send them rolling and blazing downhill. The more bonfires could be seen sparkling and flaring in the darkness, the more fruitful was the year expected to be. And the higher the dancers leaped beside or over the fire, the higher it was thought would grow the flax. In some districts, it was the last married man or woman who must kindle the bonfire. It seems hardly possible to separate from these bonfires kindled on the first Sunday in Lent the fires in which, about the same season, the effigy called Death is burned as part of the ceremony of carrying out death. We have seen that at Spackendorf in Austrian Silesia, on the morning of Rupert's Day, Shrove Tuesday, a straw man dressed in a fur coat and a fur cap is laid in a hole outside the village and there burned, and that while it is blazing, everyone seeks to snatch a fragment of it, which he fastens to a branch of the highest tree in his garden or buries in his field, believing that this will make the crops to grow better. The ceremony is known as the burying of death. Even when the straw man is not designated as death, the meaning of the observance is probably the same. For the name death, as I have tried to show, does not express the original intention of the ceremony. At Coburn in the Eifel Mountains, the lads make up a straw man on Shrove Tuesday. The effigy is formally tried and accused of having perpetrated all the thefts that have been committed in the neighborhood throughout the year. Being condemned to death, the straw man is led through the village, shot, and burned up on a pyre. They dance round the blazing pile, and the last bride must leap over it. In Oldenburg, on the evening of Shrove Tuesday, people used to make long bundles of straw, which they set on fire, and then ran about the fields waving them, shrieking and singing wild songs. Finally, they burned a straw man on the field. In the district of Dusseldorf, the straw man burned on Shrove Tuesday was made of an unthreshed sheaf of corn. On the first Monday after the spring equinox, the urchins of Zurich drag a straw man on a little cart through the streets, while at the same time the girls carry about a May tree. When Vespers ring, the straw man is burned. In the district of Aachen on Ash Wednesday, a man is used to be encased in peas straw and taken to an appointed place where he slipped quietly out of his straw casing, which was then burned, the children thinking that it was the man who was being burned. In the Val d'Aledro or Tyrol, on the last day of the carnival, a figure is made up of straw and brushwood and then burned. The figure is called the Old Woman, and the ceremony burning the old woman. And we're going to leave off right there. Tomorrow we will start at the Easter fires. I will also go over the constellations that are in the skies at these times. Thanks again for watching. Shalom.